so are you. We were waiting for somebody that we knew was coming in, so we had just a moment of grace there. So welcome everybody to the League of Women Voters Speaker Series today. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, who is a good friend and colleague, Kenton. Kenton is a professor emeritus in the School of Journalism and Mass Media. He was the director of the school from 2003 to 2015, and the university's director of general education from 2015 to 2017. And I'm sure you all know Kenton, and he's got a wonderful background and is so well equipped to do this presentation today. During his teaching career, Kenton taught courses in news reporting and editing, media history and law, and public opinion. He also taught the school's introductory course, Media and Society. So, like I said, he's well equipped to do this presentation. Before beginning his academic career, Kenton was a reporter and editor for newspapers in Moscow, Lewiston, Sandpoint, and Kellogg, which is his hometown. And before joining the University of Idaho faculty in 1999, he taught for 3 years at Colorado State University. Ken is also the co-author of a biography of former House Speaker Tom Foley, and the book is titled The Man in the Middle. It was published in 2023. So without further ado, because Ken has a lot to tell us, let's welcome Kenton, who's going to be talking about social media. Ignore them at your peril.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks to the League for the invitation, and thanks for all of you for being here. We will try over the next 55 minutes or so to scratch the surface. I described my intro to media class as a mile wide and an inch deep, and so you're going to get an inch deep version of social media. So I'm not going to talk about social media ownership, even though many of these organizations are immensely profitable. I'm not going to talk about social media regulation, because that would lead us off onto all sorts of tangents that we won't have time to address. So my goal is to give you just a little bit of the history of social media, describe some of the most current controversies and issues, and then try to leave some time for questions at the end. To begin with, though, I wanted to assess your knowledge of social media, and I hope you can see this. Maybe I'll pull the screen a little bit closer so that you're not quite so far away from. So the most popular social media measured by number of users. How many of you think it's TikTok? How many of you think it's X, formerly known as Twitter? How many say Facebook? And how many say YouTube? Well, the correct answer is YouTube. Although depending on how you measure, sometimes Facebook is more popular, but the latest figures from the Pew Research Center suggest that YouTube is used by more people, maybe not as often as Facebook, but used by more. So question 2, what is the most popular podcast in the U.S.? And I expect some of you are familiar with The Daily. There's one called Crime Junkie, the Joe Rogan Experience, or the most popular podcast among women is called Call Her Daddy. Anyone familiar with any of those? Maybe The Daily. So the correct answer is the Joe Rogan Experience. And we'll talk in a little bit about the popularity of Joe Rogan and his potential influence on American culture and society and politics, especially among young men. Third question, what is Substack? And I'm thinking that some of you are familiar with Substack. Is it a publishing platform for writers and editors, a music streaming service, a popular bakery, a stack of bread, or a construction technique?
All of the above.
It is a publishing platform for writers and editors, and it's not conventionally thought of as social media, but it's being used like social media, and I'll tell you about a few of my favorite Substack writers. So let's start with definitions, and I'm sorry this print is so small. Maybe I'll just go to the next slide to show the common element is sharing. So Wikipedia says interactive technologies that facilitate creation, sharing, and aggregation of content. Or an online platform where users share information and connect with virtual communities, and that community is another dimension. Or websites and apps that focus on community-based content creation and collaboration. So sharing is a big aspect of social media. So some characteristics of social media. It or they, if you use the plural, are decentralized. They have low startup costs. That is, anybody can create a blog or a website or create content for Facebook or YouTube. But the two-way nature of the communication is a distinguishing quality in that content creators are also content consumers, so that it goes back and forth. And that notion of membership, of belonging, of being part of an online community. So people say, well, I'm going off of Facebook, or I'm going away from my Facebook friends for a few months. Have you found a substitute for X? Are you using one of the different platforms? So there's a fraternal nature to being a social media user, consumer, and producer. So the other way to define social media is to contrast it to legacy media or old media or mainstream media or what people on the political streams refer to lamestream. So social media is not ABC, NBC, CBS, or New York Times, Washington Post, or CNN, or Fox. Although all of these established media organizations may use social media to connect with different subsets of their audiences. But in general, you can put the social media in one basket and put the mainstream or legacy media in the other. So I've got a short video that worked a few minutes ago, so we'll see if we can make that work. That will give you a chronology of social media. And this will be the only video I'll try and do today.
Why did Amazon send me $20,000? Because I use
Sorry,
Amazon
you're gonna have
AI.
to skip.
I'm going to show you a way to potentially make money.
Everyone, welcome back to Timeline. Today we're breaking down the evolution of social media, from humble beginnings to becoming a fundamental part of our daily lives. Here's how it all went down.
You're not getting
Our story begins in 1997, often considered the first recognized...
it helps to see the screen, so...
Oh, can you raise the screen, Kenton?
I'm probably blocking people.
I cannot raise the screen, but I just want to duplicate these this way.
Recognizable social media platform, 6 Degrees was a simple, crude form of the platforms we use today. It allowed users to create basic profiles and connect with others. One of the first social networking sites.
Yeah, and it's F7. PC screen.
Oh,
there
we go.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Timeline. Today we're breaking down the evolution of social media, from humble beginnings to becoming a fundamental part of our daily lives. Here's how it all went down. Our story begins in 1997. Often considered the first recognizable social media platform, 6 Degrees was a simple, crude form of the platforms we use today. It allowed users to create basic profiles and connect with others. One of the first social networking sites to reach a large audience was Friendster, launched in 2002. It had popularized concepts like profile pages, connections, but also featured status updates, which would later be elaborated upon by its successors. In 2003, MySpace let people customize their profiles with music, backgrounds, and layouts, allowing for creative expression. It was a place where users could discover new music, connect with friends through messaging and comments, and share photos and videos. MySpace also had features like top friends and bulletin posts, making it easy to stay connected and share updates with a wide audience. The same year, in the professional sphere, LinkedIn made its debut, although it would take a while for it to get popularized. It served as a valuable resource for job seekers, recruiters, and professionals, enabling users to create detailed profiles showcasing their skills and work history. 2004 saw the birth of Facebook, a platform that started in a college dorm and grew to connect billions across the globe. Founded by Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook quickly surpassed its predecessors in popularity. This was mainly due to its seamless integration into daily routines. It introduced features like the newsfeed, photo sharing, and later expanded with pages, groups, and Messenger. In 2005, YouTube would come to revolutionize online video. It gave everyone the power to share their videos, comment, like, subscribe, and connect. No fame or big companies needed. It became a global hub for sharing stories and sparking conversations, propelling ordinary people to fame and forever changing how we watch and share videos. Reddit was also founded in 2005, emerging as a diverse community-driven platform for sharing news, discussing topics, and voting on content, solidifying its place as an essential destination for exploring interests and participating in online communities. When Twitter was established in 2006, it revolutionized social media with its microblogging format, allowing users to share 140-character messages called tweets in real time. It quickly gained popularity for its simplicity and immediacy, becoming a powerful tool for sharing news, thoughts, and updates with a global audience. In 2009, WhatsApp transformed the way we communicate by offering a simple and reliable messaging service. Unlike traditional SMS messaging, WhatsApp allowed users to send text messages, photos, videos, and voice messages over the internet for free, bypassing the need for costly SMS plans. On the contrary, in 2010, Instagram would come to prioritize visual content, appealing to many for its ease of use. It also offered a wide array of filters and editing tools, which allowed users to explore their creativity. Instagram also played an important role in the rise of influencer culture, where people with a sizable following inspire others with their lifestyle. Shortly after, Pinterest provided users with a digital bulletin board to pin anything they found inspiring, making it easy to collect and organize ideas in one place. A new trend emerged when Snapchat was launched in 2011, changing social media by letting users send disappearing photos and videos called snaps. It became known for its fun features like strange filters and stories, which let you share moments creatively. With its casual vibe and privacy focus, Snapchat became a hit, especially among the youth. In 2016, TikTok became a global sensation known for its hugely popular short and creative videos that let users showcase their talents and join viral trends, while its personalized feed kept users hooked on the platform. And there you have it, the background of how we became digitally dependent. While we don't know what the future will bring, one thing is certain: the journey of social media is far from over. We hope.
So that did far more quickly than I could have summarized the early years of social media in just a few minutes.
So we're seeing your next slide. There should, the toggle should
Right.
give you another option.
It gives me an option too.
You good?
Okay.
Oh, no,
No.
we're still on your YouTube. There you go. No?
And now we're getting.
Now you have a PowerPoint.
You're blank.
Yep.
There you go. That's it.
Okay. So this was another significant development in technology, not with the social media themselves, but 2007 was a significant date because that was the release of the first iPhone, and that followed quickly by Android phones for non-Apple users. So it made possible the mobile apps that were created for social media and let you hold in your hand photos, videos, news articles, listen to music, and so the iPhone came in the middle of that period, sort of 2003 to 2008, when all those new social media platforms were being created. So that was significant. So this goes back to our quiz question at the beginning. Hope this is visible. U.S. adults, so people over 18, and this was a survey by Pew Research Center now almost 2 years ago, so May to September 2023, but some of what I have found since then are pretty consistent with this. So YouTube, most widely used, but the question is, have you ever used this particular social media platform? So it's not asking frequency or how much time you're spending. And then Facebook second, Instagram third, among all adults. Pinterest, which many of you are familiar with, is very popular. And then this looks over time at the patterns, and so you can sort of see the relative popularity. So YouTube and Facebook are the two at the top, and then
Instagram seems to not
yeah. So Instagram is the third one right here. So and then X, formerly known as Twitter, significantly behind those others. I think Twitter has a subset of the social media audience, but not nearly as much as the YouTube and Facebook do. This is another one. This is probably really hard to read, but this looks at the percentage of cell phones in March of 2025 that were using each platform. And so the top three are YouTube, WhatsApp, and Instagram at the top. So YouTube used by the measurement of this particular method 100% of social media users.
Facebook is
Facebook is the fourth one, 76%.
Does this mean that your phone comes with these apps on them, or does it mean that people are actually using them?
That people are actually using
They're
it.
actually using
So it's an active user index.
them. Okay.
And I'm not sure, obviously they're not looking at everyone's cell phone, but a representative sample. That shows
100%, wow.
Often on Facebook, you get TikTok, a lot of TikTok videos, so there's a lot of them kind of incorporate each other.
Yeah, they feed off of each other, and they're trying to get you to spend as much time as possible with their platform. And so I suspect that those TikTok ones that are posted on Facebook, some are probably user generated, but some may be paid by the company itself to promote the use. So, social media use, sorry.
How was that data collected? How many phones? Are our phones being hugged?
It says, the data source that informs this chart has changed, so values are not compatible. Sources are in the fine print at the bottom, based on a selection of apps, only figures based on the number of Android phone and phone handsets which each platform mobile app was opened in March 2025.
So they monitor when an app is open. They like to track it.
Right.
On it, is that the Android?
This says Android, but I think there's a parallel one for the iPhone.
It says Android.
Android phone and iPhone handsets on which each platform is installed.
Yeah.
So I should have printed that one so you could, if you look at social media apps index by Meltwater is the market research firm that did that. So the age variation is significant. That the among the youngest group, 18 to 29, Instagram is the most popular among the demographic of. Well, you can see the difference that age 65 plus, that those tend to be lower, except for Facebook and so that's the fairly high demographic there. And YouTube seems to have universal appeal used by many. But this, I had been under the impression that Facebook was losing popularity among younger people, the 18 to 29, but the overall numbers show that people still have Facebook, but may not be using as often as middle-aged to older adults.
So YouTube is most popular, but it's only usually between the ages of 60 and 93, is that correct?
The YouTube, that's the percentage.
Oh,
So 60% of ages 65 plus, 93% of those 18 to 29.
not age 90.
And 30 to 40
Yeah.
and also.
Yeah, and the 30 to 40, the light blue. But the gap, the percentage gap is from 93 to 60. Sort of a weird way to look at that. Yeah. So this is maybe a little easier to follow. So 18 to 29, YouTube is used by 93%, 65 plus YouTube used by 65%, Facebook 59% for 65 plus, and 68% for 18 to 29. So Pinterest seems to be most popular among older adults and not showing it as significant for the 18 to 29. So I want to shift over to podcast as an example of a type of social media that is having increasing attention and visibility, and also potentially additional political influence. So 3 things to distinguish podcasts. They're usually audio, although sometimes video. They are downloadable, so they can be listened to live, or they can be stored for later listening. And they're on demand. So you don't have to go to a particular podcast at a certain time the way you would go to NPR for Morning Edition at 7 a.m. You could get an NPR podcast at your discretion. So there's a great deal of choice involved. And there are some video podcasts that, in fact, Joe Rogan's show is video as well as audio. But primarily, audio is the most popular way that people get them. And a lot of people get their podcasts via a streaming service like Spotify. So an example of a podcast that people in Moscow may be familiar with is this one by Boise State Public Radio, Extremely American Onward Christian Soldiers, is now in its 3rd season with new episodes every month to 6 weeks, produced by James Dawson, a University of Idaho graduate, and Heath Drusen. And some of you, I know, were in the audience in December when Heath Drusen was here talking about the story behind the podcast, some of the topics that they didn't get to, and providing a little more depth. But podcasts are a long-form version of radio reporting, and each episode, I think, runs between 45 and 55 minutes. And so I'm just curious, how many of you have listened to some of the Extremely American? So that's an example close to home. So the people that track the number of listeners and subscribers, so the number 1 is, as I mentioned earlier, the Joe Rogan Experience. The next 3 are Crime Junkie, a true crime series, comes out once a week. The Daily from the New York Times, which sometimes does a news summary and sometimes takes a single story and goes into depth. And this one by a woman named Alex Cooper that's been going since 2018, called Call Her Daddy, which is everything from politics to celebrity gossip. She is very progressive. She's pro-choice. She very critical of the Republican male hierarchy, and it's very provocative and can be entertaining at times. Any of you ever listened to? Okay, yeah. What do you think?
It's very entertaining.
Entertaining. Yeah, good. So the New York Times did a profile of Joe Rogan in 2021 when he had signed a $100 million contract with Spotify to syndicate his programs. And I thought this was an interesting assessment. One of the most consumed media products on the planet, with the power to shape tastes, politics, medical decisions. A fact well known to legions of men under 40, which came into play in the 2024 election. Nonsensical to the many, Rogan unaware, which is most of us, I think, and to his own by his own admission, he is a little befuddled by his popularity. He was a stand-up comic, and had a number of movie roles in the 1990s, and then his programs typically run 2.5 to 3 hours, and so you have to be really committed, and he does these programs every day. So where I first came into contact with Joe Rogan was in the 24 campaign, when he had invited Kamala Harris to be on the program, and her staff was debating whether to accept this invitation, and he insisted that she come to Texas to be in the studio with him, and they went back and forth for several weeks, and eventually could not come to terms, so she never was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Donald Trump went to Texas and was interviewed on October 25th, 11 days before the election, and then Rogan, who had been a critic of Trump during most of his first term and up to and including the January 6th insurrection, reversed course, and Rogan endorsed Trump. So, and Rogan was seen as highly influential with white males under 40, which was a demographic that Trump carried handily. Whether that tipped the election is up to the political scientists to figure out, but that was a significant episode. So Substack, as I indicated earlier, is a publishing platform for writers, and in this description mixes together the best bits of WordPress, which is a blogging platform, and MailChimp, which is a distribution network by email. And you're probably on some MailChimp lists for the Lake Tahoe County Democrats use MailChimp. A lot of nonprofit organizations use them. This is a YouTube influencer named Erin On Demand, and she says that Substack has effectively merged social media with email marketing in the most genius way ever. So that's a different way to look at. I would describe it as sort of a self-syndication service for writers and editors. And Ryan is on Substack, right? So,
yeah.
And how many subscribers do you have?
I have about 43 paid subscribers and about 300 free ones. And so my columns that I put in the paper, I post out there as well, because the paper limits me to 750 words, but I usually write about 1,200. So people who subscribe can get the full thing, and I can publish extra stuff as well. So yeah, it's been a great platform for me to just get my work out into the world.
Yeah, and 300 plus regular readers. That's the beauty from a reader point of view, is that many of the writers you can access free, but do you have value added for the paid subscribers?
I think my goal is more to get my stuff out there than to make money. So really the benefit of paying is supporting me as a writer, but also you can look at all the old stuff. So after about 3 weeks, the free stuff clicks over to paid only.
So there's an archive available.
Yeah, so if you want the whole archive, you can pay for that. But I'm not really in it to make money, and haven't made a ton, so it's working. Just I have such a good audience through the paper here in Moscow. I thought, well, let's put it out in the world and see what happens.
How much is a subscription?
It depends on if you pay a year at once or by the month, but it's like $7 a month.
And how much of that do you get? That's what we always want.
Between 80 and 90%.
Really?
So Substack takes about 10%, and then Stripe, that does the payment processing, takes like 3%. But most of it comes to me as the writer.
And that's why it's attractive to the writers.
Yes.
Automatically removed, that's the problem.
It should be, yeah.
It automatically renews every year?
I'm sure there's an option to turn that on and off as a customer, but.
So these are my 3 Substack paid subscriptions.
Right.
Heather Cox Richardson, Letters from an American, Mark Johnson, longtime Idaho journalist, and worked on the staff of Cecil Andrus as press secretary and chief of staff. And it's been, his columns appear in the Lewiston Tribune a couple times a month, and he has just moved over to Substack instead of managing his own email list of readers. And some of you may remember Adam Sowards, who taught environmental history at the U of I, retired 3 years ago, and lives in Mount Vernon, Washington. And he writes once a week on a Northwest topic, usually politics, nature, environment. So I can barely keep up with Heather Cox Richardson because she's writing every day.
In depth every day.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And Adam Sowards is writing less often, but often topics that I haven't read or heard about elsewhere. I'm drawing a lot from history the way that Heather Cox Richardson does. So if you're not familiar, you just go to substack.com and you can get an index of what you can search by topic, or you can search by writer's name. Yes?
I would say, as a fan of Heather Cox Richardson, in some way, watching her in-depth interviews on YouTube is, in a way, better than her daily letters. She's just incredible.
Yes, and
Is that really on YouTube?
yeah, so Heather Cox Richardson sort of uses one platform to promote the other, and if you just go to YouTube and type her name in, you'll get at least the most recent interviews, or the one that I just watched this morning. She's answering questions from her readers, which is fun. And people say, well, why does this happen? Or what's the significance of executive order? Where does the authority come from to do that?
One thing you have to register for Substack, and that's what I held off for a long time. I didn't know what it was. And then when you start to click on it, they say you have to register, so they know that you are a registered Substack reader.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that.
Although with Heather Cox Richardson, if you
you
were,
can do that. Yeah.
you can get it different ways, and not through Substack.
I get it through email.
Through email.
Yeah. And
You
Robert,
just get a daily email.
Robert Wright.
Yeah, Robert Wright has
Is Adam mostly talking about environmental issues, and that was his focus?
environmental and sort of regional history issues. Yeah. He often, I think one of his monthly columns is he'll find a book about environmental history or Northwest history and reread it and then summarize it. And so you would know whether, well, this is something worth reading again.
Or not. Just listening to him.
Yeah.
Just moving to a conclusion here, and I'm sorry this type is so small, I probably should have done 2 slides. I wanted to summarize some of the positive and negative things about social media, and I'll read these for the benefit of those sitting away from the screen. With social media, the public agenda can be set by people other than politicians or media figures. There's a way for citizens to trickle up with topics, to raise issues or ask questions, to help keep things in the public view. So that's a positive. And social media can provide a greater level of civic awareness, I think, that people can, certainly in a community like Moscow, it's possible to follow local agencies, local nonprofit organizations, and you learn about things like the May Day rally in East City Park on Thursday through social media. You are all probably being besieged on both social media and through email for Idaho Gives this week. And so that's the repetition of those messages does create a sense of community, but also an awareness of what the challenges are faced by many of these nonprofit groups. It's easy to stay connected to family and friends worldwide. So I was an early adopter of LinkedIn and have now over 500 LinkedIn contacts, many of those who are former students who will use that to reach out to me for networking purposes. But then I use Facebook maybe for friends as opposed to former students and former colleagues.
LinkedIn's hard to get information from.
You have to join in order to get the full profile of other people.
And even then, you have to do it over and over. It's really hard.
Jerry and I were talking this morning about the local library election and about the best way to get information out to people who might not know there's election or know when and where to vote or who the candidates are. And Jerry's response was, put it on Facebook, because with a local newspaper that's only published twice a week, with declining print subscriptions and uncertain readership online, that more people are likely to see a Facebook post than to see a letter to the editor, a newspaper article. And I think in communities where local news is no longer profitable for the companies that publish newspapers or run radio stations, that social media can help fill the gap. The negatives, self-selection. People tend to follow people that they know, people that they admire or respect, and they go to news sites that tend to reinforce their own points of view. So the political scientists and the communication specialists call these echo chambers or filter bubbles. That is that your news is being filtered by the bubble that you live and work in. And so that's perhaps more benign than the outright misinformation and the fake news that circulates on social media, particularly during election season. Bullying and harassment is a very real problem on social media, and the negative mental health effects, especially on teens and children, are a serious concern and a challenge for regulators who are trying to monitor and regulate content of social media. So I'm going to close with a quote from our esteemed former President Barack Obama in his farewell address in January of 2017. He wrote, "We retreat into our own bubbles, especially our social media feeds." So 8 years ago, he was calling our attention to this. We're surrounded by people who look like us and share the same political outlook and never challenge our assumptions. Increasingly, we've become so secure in our bubbles, those filter bubbles, that we start accepting only information, whether it's true or not, that fits our opinions, instead of basing our opinions on the evidence. So that's the challenge for all of us as social media consumers, is to break out of our filter bubbles, to look for news and opinion outside our echo chambers, and to be informed consumers of news, commentary, and from all sources. So, little time for questions. Yes, please.
So Joe Rogan has influenced so many men under 40, and
These are two of my jam colleagues.
and they might have actually won the election. So who are the progressives putting forward to match Joe Rogan? I mean, Heather Cross Richardson is very interesting, but she's intellectual. She's not going to reach those people, and neither are the other people. I think that Steve Schmidt actually is far more, maybe on the level of Joe Rogan.
One of the podcasts I listen to is On the Media, which is also an over-the-air program on NPR. And they have devoted a couple of shows about where is the Joe Rogan on the left. And I have identified a couple of people. Rachel Maddow, but she's primarily cable news, MSNBC. There are, I subscribe also to the Bulwark, which is a group of, originally they were never Trump Republicans, led by Wade and Crystal, and they have a number of women and younger people that they're trying to give a platform to. But if somebody has a good alternative on the left, I mean, Joe Rogan is 57 now, so he's not exactly young either.
Kamala Harris could have been, or started that.
So Kamala Harris is going to give a speech today for the first time since the election.
Oh, good.
And so
Where?
I'm not sure. I think it's in California because it'll probably be on MSNBC and on YouTube. Yeah, so on YouTube first.
One I enjoy that's pretty far left is the Midas Touch Network. It's on YouTube. That guy is priceless, and he has everything up to date, including the interview with Trump last night on ABC.
Yeah.
And today I hear Trump has nominated himself for the Pope.
One negative that wasn't listed is that, and one reason I get off some of these things is that one spends too much time going to all these places, and I was on these things, and all of a sudden you look at my watch, I'm like, we could have been read another thing.
It is indeed a time sink, and that is a great weakness. And you think of young people, teenagers. My own students spent so much time on social media, particularly TikTok, that it is addictive. Yes.
Just a couple of comments. Along with that time sink, it begins to replace face-to-face interactions and socialization, which is the gold standard in my opinion, communication, maintaining unity and a sense of civilization. The other thing I would mention is, on the 40 and younger male demographic, to someone who likes to think he was a bit of a nerd, it's a hard thing to look at, but the reality is that Joe Rogan has a macho appeal. And that is going to have to be an element in some way of any alternative. It's got to be, young men of strength and integrity and so on, but it's going to need to have that flavor of this is how I can be a man and be this way.
I suspect there are Democratic strategists who are even today having focus groups with young men and trying different messages and different appeals to try and address that healthy masculinity versus toxic masculinity.
Adam Kinzinger's kind of an interesting
Oh,
person,
I should have
because I
mentioned
think
him,
he
yeah.
has some of that, just in who he is and how he behaves and conducts himself.
And he's very good on YouTube.
Yeah, I enjoy his sessions.
So, yes, please.
So my question is, as a person who refuses to be on social media, how do I find out what's going on? I mean, it's amazing, I can't find yard sales anymore, I can't find what's going on with the, I read Kathy Dawes, she sends us stuff, so I know what's going on with the protests, but I don't, how do you find out then anything?
Your friends call you.
So-
Is that really,
so for-
This is the world.
For local news, I think that you increasingly will have to go back to those face-to-face, the interpersonal conversations, or as email or text messages to friends allow. There is a huge news gap at the local level. I've actually turned. I'm listening more to Spokane Public Radio for Idaho news than Northwest Public Broadcasting, which is mostly Olympia, Western Washington, and some Oregon news. For state news, there are a couple of great websites that are nonprofit news sites. One is the Idaho Capital Sun, started by one of my former students, Christina Lawrence. And the other is the Idaho Education News, which did the best coverage of the University of Idaho's attempt to purchase University of Phoenix and the millions of dollars that were spent on legal fees and accountants and auditors. And national level, New York Times, The Guardian. I know a lot of people have soured on the Washington Post, but there's still useful news from Washington Post. Wall Street Journal has a far-right editorial page, but news coverage has still been pretty good. But all of the Guardian is donation only, so you can get a lot of free content from that. But Times, Post, and Wall Street Journal, you would need to subscribe to. So, real quick, that's kind of funny.
That was a really good answer to her question. The topic of your speech was ignoring your peril. So can you speak a little bit more of what that peril is?
Well, the peril is reflected in this list of negative things. It is that if you're not paying attention to social media, you are missing what the right is doing, what the left is doing. That social media is often the first wave of news about a trend. So 5 years ago, with the COVID pandemic, when X was still Twitter, some of the early reporting about this mysterious virus and the public health consequences was on social media before the mainstream media picked it up. So I think it can be sort of an advance guard or an early warning of trends in society. I think if you're trying to stay abreast of popular culture, of music and movies and even books, I think social media can often be the pathway to hearing about a great new author or a new film that it may take a little longer to trickle up to the mainstream media. But I think it's part of our political and cultural reality. Is why I say we ignore it at our peril. It's a force for good and a force for bad as well. So, but Barbara,
just sort of a side note on, like, if you're not on social media, how do you find out about things? It's not just news, but it's actually what's going on locally, and I find more and more people or restaurants restaurants or what you want to find out about, you have to go to Facebook. I mean, that's how I found out about Lively Catering and their to-go dinners. And it wasn't by going to their website, it was by seeing their post on Facebook that for a very modest sum of money, you could get a dinner delivered. So, and I think that's true of all the restaurants. They don't really keep their websites up anymore.
That's
It's easier and cheaper to put that stuff on Facebook.
Yes, and if you want to know who's playing at One World Cafe on Friday night, you can go to their Facebook page. So we have time for one more question. Is there anybody who hasn't asked one? Something that you have? So you want to arm wrestle? So,
she's been on a few times.
if you want to be fast.
I want to put in a plug for getting online the Moscow Pullman Daily News. It really is a good quick look. And the other thing I want to mention is the Contrarian, which is a Substack, I believe.
Yeah, you just said that to me.
That's all.
Do you think with like the threatened freedom of speech at like CBS, Trump's all the same, sorry, that he's going to take down MSNBC and his list, but if you have Substack, there are so many people that would be like playing whack-a-mole, you can't.
I think it's the diversity of opinions and the diversity of news sources will sort of, you couldn't shut down all of those 1,000 writers. Okay,
mine is the cost. You mentioned 3 major newspapers, and if you subscribe to those 3, plus if you do if you do all of these solicitations for donations for your causes, it's a pretty expensive experience.
You probably wouldn't want to do all 3 at once. Maybe do Times for 3 months, the Post for 3 months, and New Republic.
Even all of the Idaho ones are now subscription, and you have to pay. So,
but not Idaho Capital. But not Idaho Capital Sun.
Okay, but the Boise one, what's it called? Boise Statesman.
Idaho Statesman and Idaho Press are all.
You get one story, and then it says, sorry, you gotta subscribe, and that gets costly.
So I hear the clock striking 1.
So, thank Ken for the delightful.
Bring your attention to the table, which has a lot of voter information on it. And if you'd like to donate to our education fund or our operating budget, there's a jar there. You're not required to, but you're welcome to. And we have a couple of announcements for the good
Well,
order.
you covered that. Early voting begins May 5th, which is next week. And if you have any questions about the election coming up for registration, I'll be up here after.
Okay, today marks the 100th day since President Trump took office. In just over 3 months, the president has issued a series, and I'm reading this from the League of Women Voters website.
Francis, why don't you stand up so you can project?
Okay. Has issued a series of executive orders and directed actions that violate the law and encroach upon Congress's constitutional authority, threatening our liberties, Constitution, and democracy. Congress must protect the rule of law, defend the Constitution, and end the overreach by the executive branch of government. The League has a vital role to play. So to that end, if you go to the League of Women Voters website and look at Lobby for Democracy, April 30th today is the 100th day of Donald Trump's presidency. So there are a lot of different things that you can do, actions. So
that's from national?
This is national, yeah. So you go to the website, lots of actions, really easy to access any of them, and so that's today. They're asking everybody to go there today.
And remember that League is a nonpartisan organization, and so
to
this
that.
concern
Yes.
is nonpartisan. And
Yeah,
critical.
that's right.
Okay.
So